Welcome, Comic-Con. I'm Joy Cates from NASA. Welcome to the panel, Back to the Moon and Beyond with NASA. As part of the Artemis program, we are sending astronauts to the moon to prepare for future trips to Mars. With robots and humans, we will explore more of the moon than ever before, boldly going where no one has gone before, including the lunar South Pole. Today's panel includes astronaut Kjell Lindgren, and astronaut Nicole Man, spacesuit engineer Lindsay Aitchison, and space tech expert LaNetra Tate. And leading this virtual discussion is someone very familiar to human spaceflight. You may know him best as Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. Please welcome today's moderator, actor William Shatner.
Here we are in the latest ways of communicating to a large group of people. I'm going to be your moderator for this panel, but in essence, I'm reflecting all of you. Some of you in the audience know a great deal. I presume most of you are like me. We know very little and wish to find out more. So I'm going to reflect your innocence and your curiosity about what's happening on Artemis. NASA is going back to the moon, and with the ambitions of staying there and seeing what human beings can do on the moon, exploring the moon for all its mysteries and all its possibilities. And to do that, among the people that are responsible for planning, executing, and going to the moon are four individuals of a number of other individuals. They represent everybody else. I'd love you to introduce yourself. Lindsay, why don't you start?
Okay. Hi there, I'm Lindsay Aitchison, and I am a spacesuit engineer working as part of the Exploration Extravehicular Activity System that's going to be the new spacesuit that astronauts are going to wear on the surface of the moon, and the precursor for help us learn what we need to design when we go onto Mars.
So you're going to be responsible for what they're wearing and the ease. They won't be jumping, leaping the way they did and playing golf.
They'll be playing golf, but they'll have a much better stroke this time. You'll actually be able to move those hips as you swing through with the club. And so
Really?
there's a lot more mobility in the system.
We'll find out more about that in a second. And Nicole, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm astronaut Nicole Man, and I am part of the astronaut corps here at NASA. We live in Johnson Space Center, and right now it's a very exciting time for all astronauts because we are training and preparing for spaceflight, not only to the International Space Station, but our future missions to the moon under the Artemis mission and eventually to Mars. So I hope to be able to play a role in each of those explorations.
Wow. And Kjell.
Hey, so excited to be joining this panel today. I'm NASA astronaut Kjell Lindgren, and just as Nicole said, very excited for our office, for NASA, and for our country as we embark on this next generation of exploration. We have astronauts living and working on the International Space Station right now, doing science and research to enable our future exploration. And then we're very excited about this Artemis program, our return to the moon for a sustainable, permanent presence.
And LaNetra.
Hi, I'm LaNetra Tate, and I represent Space Technology Mission Directorate. And in our directorate, we know that technology drives exploration, and we develop critical technologies that will allow us to live a sustained presence on the moon and then on to Mars.
Great. So that's our panel, everybody. And what I'd like to do is get the panel talking about that word sustainable. Keeps coming up in conversation about sustainables. That means we're going to the moon and we're going to stay there. That's an extraordinary ambition that has only been a science fiction up until now. What do they build? How do they build it? What are the vehicles to get there? What do they do when they're there? Are they underground? Are they above ground? All those things. Let's talk about. Why doesn't somebody start about how are we going to get there? Not only the two astronauts, I presume there are two, but all the other people that are needed to to get people to do the sustainability on the moon. How are we going to do that, Lindsay?
Well, we have a multi-stage system. So you're going to start with the crew launching from Earth in the Orion vehicle. So they'll be inside that capsule to take them all the way out to the moon.
Hold on. That's inside the vehicle. What's the rocket going to look like?
Big, very big.
How big? Bigger than anyone? Bigger than anyone has been before?
The eventual goal, the high power rocket we'll have will eventually be larger than the Saturn V. That's as we build up to have more and more capability. So it's all about progressive leaps to get further and further away from Earth.
How long will that take, Lindsay?
So our first mission is in 2024. And then by the time we get to sustainable missions and on to Mars, that'll be around 2028 and into the 2030s to have those really big rockets that'll get us further and further away from Earth.
Nicole, are you going to be alive in that period of time? It's a decade away.
Well, I hope so, Bill. I'm not planning on going anywhere, as far as not living.
Except to the moon, right?
Except to the moon, absolutely. Yes, this is we'll launch on the rocket's called SLS, and that's what we'll launch to the moon, and the spacecraft's called Orion. And so we'll start flying those missions, first an uncrewed test flight, and then Artemis 2 will be a crewed flight around the moon, and Artemis 3 will be the first mission where we land humans back on the moon.
So let me understand that. It's going to take 4 years from now to get somebody to go around the moon like we did, or land?
4 years to get somebody to land on the moon. So our goal is to have boots on the moon by 2024 and to land the first woman and the next man on the moon.
Fantastic. So it'll take us 4 years to repeat what we did, 30 years ago?
Well, actually, we've been working on this for quite a long time. The rocket SLS is almost complete and built. The Orion spacecraft is already down at Kennedy Space Center. So it takes a long time. And the reason why is because these systems are much safer, much more technologically advanced than they were in the past. And instead of going and just staying, for a day or two on the moon's surface, we're building a gateway, which will be in cislunar orbit around the moon. And astronauts will live on board there for up to 30 days.
Well, hold on, please. You're going to build a what to go? Is it going to go around the moon, in orbit around the moon?
Yes, so it's called Gateway, and
what does it look like?
It's an orbital outpost. So it looks like probably something very similar to what you saw during your time in the movies. It will be an outpost that can sustain human presence for 30 days. And from there, astronauts could leave the gateway, go down to the surface of the moon. We can also launch rovers and other robotic exploration.
Gateway will have rovers on it and the ability to navigate around the different orbits around the moon?
Yes, so we will still control the gateway from Earth, and we can control and change its orbits in cislunar space.
That means two vehicles, the rocket vehicle that got to the moon, and then it launches orbit?
So we'll actually launch into orbit, and then we'll launch additional spacecraft or parts. We're going to build this together like a Lego system.
Orbit will be built by astronauts in orbit around the moon.
Yes, very similar to how the space station was built.
Holy moly, that's really something. Lindsay, tell us what the suit is going to consist of.
So our spacesuit has two primary bits. So it has the backpack, which has all of your life support, like your oxygen and the air that you breathe. And then it also has the human-shaped bit on the front, which we call the pressure garment. And so it's really unique in that it's a modular system that we can actually resize bits and pieces of it real time. So we can fit the entire cadre of the astronaut corps in a much smaller set of parts.
Okay, now that's great from a technical point of view. In more human terms, what does that mean?
It means that, so when you're working in a spacesuit, it's kind of like working inside of a big balloon. And that doesn't sound very mobile, right? So we have to add features in it to make it easier to move. And those features, we use bearings, so it allows you to move your arm all the way in a circle, twist at the waist, bend down, pick up rocks. And so we've done a better job of enabling you to change out the sizes of those pieces so that it fits everybody really well.
Chet.
Yes, Bill.
Kjell, what's your thing?
Well, my thing for the past 10 years has been training for space flight and having the opportunity to fly on the International Space Station
Okay, well, hold
as
on.
an astronaut.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
Yes.
Training for 10 years. I mean, doctors train for 6 years, right? They get a degree. I mean, LaNetra got a degree in chemistry. I'm coming to LaNetra in a moment. She spent less than 10 years to be this expert. What, for God's sakes, have you been doing for 10 years?
So I'm actually a physician by training, an emergency medicine physician. So I'm very
You're a
familiar with
physician.
the
Wait a minute.
education
So you
process.
spent 4 years in graduate school becoming a physician.
That's right. And then another
Specialty?
another 3 years for my specialty.
Well, you spent 4 years an undergraduate, 3 years for your
That's right.
specialty, that's 7, and 10 years training as an astronaut?
Well, as a part of our job, we are constantly training. And so when we join the astronaut office, we spend 2 years as astronaut candidates, learning all of the different disciplines that are needed to be successful in space.
And you use an interesting word, candidate. You were
That's
a
right.
candidate. You weren't nominated.
Well, once we get selected into the astronaut office, we become candidates, and that's pending
With the
successful
possibility of not being chosen.
with the possibility of not finishing that training. And for the most part, we do a great job of selecting our astronauts with the expectation that all of them successfully complete the training.
Well, of
And
course.
once
The
we
same
finish
way
that,
you did as a physician, right? But not everybody finished medical school.
that's true. That's true.
So you
Um,
would, if you failed out of the astronaut training, you would have spent 17 years getting ready and not do it.
Well, we work very hard to choose the right people into the astronaut office, and to ensure that they're successful in finishing that astronaut candidate training. And so that takes about 2 years. And then after we finish astronaut candidate training, become active astronauts, we serve in the astronaut office, supporting our colleagues that are preparing for flight. And then I was selected or assigned to a mission in 2013. I spent another 2 years training for that mission, and then flew to the International Space Station in 2015 and spent a little under 5 months living and working in low Earth
I hope
orbit.
we have time to examine what an astronaut does in training. I mean, I know you got to fix the the telescope and know what to do and where to turn the wrench. I understand that, but that's a lot of time training, on-job training. I mean, you
Yes.
could be head of General Motors by that time.
Well, it's one of the joys of being an astronaut. Many of us will say that the best job off the Earth is flying in space, and the best job on the Earth is training for space flight. We
Wow.
become kind of a jack of all trades, and maybe a master of none. But we have several major disciplines. We need to know how to use the robotic arm, how to do a spacewalk, how to repair and operate the systems on the space station, and then when Nicole and I first started at NASA on day one, we started learning the Russian language, because the Russian systems are a major part of our
So
international space
can you fix things at home? Does your wife ask you to fix the electrical whatever?
She does.
And I'll bet you
And I
do it,
do.
right? Fantastic. LaNetra, tell us about yourself. You're intriguing. Chemical degree and propulsion. Tell us a bit about yourself.
I have a PhD in chemistry. My specialty was always in materials and manufacturing. So I started at the Kennedy Space Center as a researcher in the lab. And then I worked my way in different project teams, from composites. And then I work at NASA headquarters, where I manage a large program where we develop technology to demonstrate them in space or on the ground. So Nicole talked about Gateway, and we are developing ion propulsion to
Really?
power. Right. So if you we're talking sci-fi today. If you remember from Star Wars, the TIE fighters.
Star Wars?
Oh, but wait. Hey, but Bill, remember the episode you did on Spock's brain,
Yeah,
right?
he had
Spock's
done.
brain, right? And you all were enamored with the ion propulsion
I
system,
know. I've looked
right?
up.
Remember
I've
that?
read a little bit about ion propulsion.
So we're actually, you remember that the blue light's indicative of ion thrusters. And NASA's working with industry, and I have a project called Solar Electric Propulsion. And that's going to allow us to do larger missions that we haven't been able to do before. So that's what my program does. We work with smartest, the brightest people in the country, industry, and in NASA to develop these cool technologies that we can
Unbelievable.
infuse into our NASA missions.
So are you thinking of using the solar wind?
Well, we have looked at that, and that hasn't been taken off the table. But solar electric power provides us more of an efficient propellant
I
system
see.
than our chemical propulsion system. So,
So,
depending on the mission architect for the moon or for Mars, we have a variety of advanced propulsion systems that we can utilize.
this is a question for all of you, because you brought it up, LaNetra. Um, has science fiction affected you guys? Has you mentioned Star Wars and has science fiction affected your choices of career and even choices once you were in the program? That since that was fantasized, can you make it a reality? Anybody speak up about that?
Well, Bill, I'll chime in. I was absolutely influenced by science fiction very early on, both movies and the written word, um, inspired by the possibilities, the worlds that were created, and and so that was very central to my interest when I was young. And then watching the space shuttle launch for the very first time in 1981. I was in second grade. I remember my teacher wheeling a television in so that we could watch the launch.
For goodness sake.
So that gave wings to this interest, this dream of science fiction, and I've wanted to be involved in human space flight ever since.
But you
I
took
would agree. Bill,
please.
I would agree that I'm a big sci-fi fan, both Star Wars and Star Trek, and I think just being able to share the excitement and the inspiration that we inspire at NASA, and being able to extend that to my son, who's now part of this great Artemis generation. We're trying to inspire the next generation of scientists and researchers and future scientists and researchers. So if you think about the sci-fi movies that we see now, and the new Star Wars, the new Star Trek, our young generation, they're looking at that and they're saying, "Wow," and that's bringing awareness to them to the space program. And like Kjell said, I grew up in Florida, so walking out in my front yard and being able to see a spectacular launch
Right.
just brought awareness for me for the space program.
So as a child, you began to conceive the idea of what you wanted to do.
Right, because I saw it. I saw these, every generation has a rocket, right? Apollo, I was space, the STS system, and now we have Artemis, and just being able to see that. And then also being able to see astronauts that look like me, like Dr. Mae Jemison, being the first African American female to go to space, really gave me the confidence to say, okay, I'm going to go get that advanced degree in a STEM related field. So I think a combination of sci-fi and having that awareness of the space program, and then being able to inspire the younger generation. And on top of that, NASA's a great place to work. So I think collectively that all inspires all of us. I think you would hear on this panel to really love what we do.
That's wild. And Nicole, tell us about yourself and that ambition and where that came from.
I
Where
think
did
science
where did the
fiction.
child how did the child become you?
Well, the child is still me. I tell you, I still watch science fiction and I read books and I get excited and I dream and I wonder what it'll be like to walk on the moon and to eventually go to Mars. But instead of looking at it from purely a science fiction standpoint, I see that as possible, realities and possible futures that we hold. So that certainly played a part as I was a child growing up. And then I served in the military. I'm an active duty Marine, and I flew F-18s in the Marine Corps. And so, as a kid growing up with some of those movies and some of those stories, it just gets you excited and sometimes gives you that motivation and that confidence that LaNetra was talking about in life to go ahead and take those steps and apply for that job and do something, because it's not impossible. Nothing's impossible these days. And so early on, I think you learn that all these opportunities are out there, and they're just out there waiting for you to grab them.
There's a possibility that I'm going to go up for a brief moment, come back down, and I'm filled with trepidation because I see in front of me the terrible accidents that have happened in prior, like the O-ring thing. I mean, that O-ring thing has got to be part of part of everybody's consciousness when sending a rocket up. Does anybody want to address that factor, the O-ring possibilities? No, huh?
So I would say that the Challenger accident, the Columbia accident, that all of those mishaps greatly inform how we do business at NASA. We are always trying to improve. We're always trying to be safer, and so we take those accidents very seriously. We take the lessons that we learn from those accidents very seriously and apply those lessons to how we do business now and how we plan to do business in the future.
Right.
Absolutely, we don't, those were absolute tragedies. That loss of life is unfortunately a part of business when you're doing something as hard as we're trying to do, and that is send people into space and sustain them there. And so we're very grateful for the team that is building the architecture, building the vehicles, building the spacesuits, as Lindsay has described, and for their attention to detail, and making sure that everything that we're doing as safely as possible.
Well, it's a voyage of discovery, and every new venture, whether it's technological or psychological, every new venture carries with it risks. I understand that.
I also want to add that we are sending the first female and the next man for 2024, but we're also working technologies to get us prepared for that sustainability in 2028. And the key to that is developing infrastructure. So we
Right.
need to develop the infrastructure so the astronauts can live and work for an extended period of time.
Can you
So
just
those are power systems and precision landing and hazard avoidance, to understand the terrain and in situ resource utilization.
can you describe what that lunar housing looks like?
The
Is it?
habitat,
Yeah, the
Lindsay,
habitat.
Lindsay, that's on Lindsay's side of the field, the habitat.
Lindsay, what's it look like?
We're looking at a couple of different options. One is like building an outpost that you could think of, a cylindrical can sitting on the surface that's the beginning of a habitation. But we're also looking at a mobile habitat. So something that would be like a small pressurized rover. So your RV, you can go out for up to 30 days in your RV doing science over a broad area and
Wow.
bring samples back to your fixed foundational surface habitat later.
Well, why would unless there was something at the fixed habitat, you wouldn't need to. You're
Well,
self-contained, right?
you could. You don't have to go back to the habitat, but you could use that habitat as a point to do science, looking at in situ resource utilization, which I'm sure LaNetra can tell you all the details about that. But basically, if you want to spend a lot of time in one area or have logistics stockpiled in one area, that's what you
What
can do with your foundational
what's
hat.
the opinion? Do you want to spend a lot of time in one area or go exploring? And in addition to that, what's on the Antarctic side of the moon? Why go to a pole?
The South Pole, well, we have evidence, confirmed evidence that there's water resources in the form of polar ice or water ice.
Right.
So we want to, and NASA's actually going to send a rover in 2023 to the South Pole so
Wow.
that we can understand those water resources. We can actually drill and collect samples so that that can inform what type of excavation and extraction tools we'll need for future ISRU type capabilities on the lunar surface.
Do we know LaNetra, do we know the quality of that water? Do we know that it's not poisonous?
We do not know, and that's one objective of the mission in 2023 for the Viper rover, is to take that sample and understand the concentration and to understand what's the makeup of those water resources.
At JPL, one of the visits I did, they were working on a rover, and I don't know for the Mars. I'm not quite sure what it was for, but they were working it on all kinds of terrain at JPL, like rocks and stones and how it would grip. That's a fascinating.
Well,
Even that.
JPL leads a lot of our rover technology and our rover efforts. We have Curiosity on Mars right now. This summer, we'll be launching Mars Perseverance. And many of those technologies that we'll be testing out on Mars will also help inform some of the capabilities we need for a sustainable presence on the moon.
So what's the thinking? Why send it to Mars and not send it to the moon, since the first journey is to the moon?
Well, for example, for ISRU, before the end of this decade,
What is
in
this?
situ, in situ resource utilization. So just
What?
like on Earth,
What?
so just like on Earth, where we have natural gas and coal and oil to power our appliances and fuel our transportation, the moon and Mars have local materials and natural resources that we need to understand so that we can decrease our dependency on Earth and be able to live off the land.
Well, do we know that it's different? I mean, my understanding is the moon reflects the Earth very much, since we have some moon samples.
So we know on the lunar surface that we have lunar regolith that have mineral oxides that we can potentially extract oxygen, and we can use that for life support for the astronauts for breathing air. We also know at the South Pole we have those water resources that we could potentially extract hydrogen and water. We also know on Mars that the Martian atmosphere is about 96% carbon dioxide. So also on Mars Perseverance, we're sending an ISRU experiment called MOXIE, Mars Oxygen ISRU Experiment, to Mars to extract some CO2 from the atmosphere to produce a small amount of oxygen. So on both the moon and Mars, we are doing experiments and collecting information to have some concrete data to help us develop technologies in preparation for crewed missions on both the moon and Mars.
What are you doing? Why are we going to Mars? Anybody address? All of you address that.
Why not go to Mars?
Because it's dangerous and it uses a lot of facilities that could take the carbon dioxide and the methane out of our air.
But it also inspires. But it also inspires the next generation. It also inspires young boys and girls all over the globe to think bigger, to ask questions, to say, hey, I may be having challenge in this math class, but if I work really hard, I can be like this astronaut or this scientist or this engineer. So it inspires a whole new generation.
Kjell, what's your hope? What voyage do you want to be on? When do you want to go? And tell us why.
Well, it's such a privilege to have the opportunity to be a part of this larger team that is exploring our solar system. And I was inspired by those images of our early astronauts exploring the moon. And so I would absolutely love to have that opportunity to see the moon with my own eyes, to watch our beautiful home planet. And that's when you have an audacious goal, a goal like this. It requires the best of all of those involved. And while we're doing those things to achieve these goals, we are innovating new technologies that ultimately serve humanity, and we can do it. I mean, we absolutely can do it. We have pulled things off. We have an International Space Station that's had a human presence on it for almost 20 years now. That incorporates teams of countries that were former foes, former adversaries. it is a demonstration of what we are able to do when we work together for something that's peaceful. And I think that cooperation and these goals will have really no choice but to improve humanity.
Thank you. That was a great summary of what we're doing here. I want to thank you all for being part of this panel. You made me, I was fascinated by it, and I'm very grateful for you to have been here. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Live long and prosper.
Oh, yeah, sure, to you.
And that'll wrap up our discussion on NASA's return to the moon. Many thanks to our panelists and William Shatner for moderating this lunar exploration discussion. To learn more about our Artemis program, please visit nasa.gov/Artemis.